Good morning, everyone. I'm here this morning with Rosemary Kilkenny, Georgetown Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, our Chief Diversity Officer, and Dr. Angelyn Mitchell, an Associate Professor in the Departments of English and African American Studies, the founder of our African American Studies program here at Georgetown. I want to thank you both for taking the time to join me this morning. So let's begin our conversation. As part of our new student orientation for all of our incoming undergraduate students, Rosemary, you were part of a planning team that organized a panel on confronting racism. You served as the moderator of our discussion. And Angie, you participated on the panel with Father Brian Massingale, a colleague of ours from Fordham. Can I ask each of you to begin by sharing why it was so important for us to begin our year with a conversation on racism? Are there particular insights or reflections from the experience, from the panel, from the questions from students that you'd like to share? Rosemary, first we'll turn to you, and then we'll turn to Angie.
Okay, thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be with you this morning and with Dr. Mitchell to discuss this very important topic. Quite frankly, this global pandemic has had such a disproportionate impact regarding not only the infection, but also the fatalities in the Black community. Not only pointing out the health disparities that exist for Black Americans, but also how structural racism impacts all aspects of Black life in this country. Added to that sad and disturbing reality, we also witness the escalation of murders of Black men and women at the hands of police. And as we all know, these incidents really resulted and resonated with many members of our citizenry. And we saw them emanating in protests across the country, across the globe. And we also heard clarion calls to end systemic racism, including the dismantling of the vestiges of discrimination. So given our institutional commitment, given Georgetown's institutional commitment to doing racial justice work and working on these issues, we felt that it was really imperative for us to educate our incoming students about our own history and connection to the enslavement of people of African descent and how it shaped and still impacts the lived experiences of Black Americans today. Finally, we wanted to send a message to our students that we cannot and we will not sit idly by and in the midst of the violence that we see perpetrated against Black and brown citizens of this country. Racial justice work requires all of us to get involved. It requires all of us to the rebuilding of our society so that every citizen and everyone can feel that they are getting a fair shake of what goods and services that this country has to offer.
Let me ask Angie for her thoughts, having that opportunity to be with our entering class.
Thank you so very much for including me in this conversation. I was delighted to be a part of the new student orientation workshop on racial justice because, as you both know, my work at Georgetown has been centered in quiet ways and less quiet ways on those very issues, right? And I think it's just absolutely critical that our students understand that we as a community are committed to advancing racial justice. I thought about how the panel reflected, the Jesuit values, right, of men and women for others. And what better way of highlighting that than to have a conversation in the midst of what Rosemary has very eloquently described, right? The pandemic of this health crisis, as well as the epidemic of racial injustice, and those two confluences and what they mean now for our students and for us all, I think was very important.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. Angie, in your comments during the panel, you talked about the work of anti-racism and how it is a deeply personal journey. What are the kinds of resources that we can call upon in this work? Let me ask both of you, Rosemary and Angie, how can we encourage and support each other as we work to address racial injustice?
That's such a critical point of what we are committed to doing, I think, in terms of anti-racism and the work for that cause. I like to think of it this way. Diversity, which we are, I think, pretty comfortable with thinking that we understand, is about who's in that room, right? Inclusion is if you have the opportunity to impact being in that room. But the work of anti-racism, I think, has more to do with how we reorient, perhaps in some ways, and how we learn in other ways what it means to enact racial justice. Cornel West has said that justice is what love looks like in public. And I think we need to be guided by this notion that we are, as Dr. King described, working toward the beloved community. And in doing so, we have to be able to take stock of who we are and where we are in that journey, that experience, that understanding of difference that seems to, unfortunately, that's been one of the stumbling blocks of us being able to be the type of country that we ideally would like to be.
Sure. Rosemary?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think it's really important for our faculty to really embrace the work that we're doing. And one of the positive aspects for me of our discussion on last Monday, on the workshop on racial justice, confronting racism, was to hear from the students directly about how important it is for them to be able to have these discussions. In fact, we were supposed to end our panel at 5, but they didn't want to end 5. About halfway through our discussion, the work kept coming through the chat. We wanted to go beyond 5 o'clock, and so of course we were happy to oblige them. And what students really want, they really want to see this issue embedded within their courses. A number of the questions were, does Georgetown have a requirement for racial justice as part of the course requirements for us graduating? If not, how can we make this happen? So I think we really have this moment and this opportunity to get faculty on board, and not to say that we don't have faculty who are doing this already in their courses, but I think we need to have a critical mass of faculty, especially those who are teaching these required courses, to embed this work within the content of what they're offering. Look at the diversity of the scholars whose work are being introduced to our students. So these are some of the things that we can be doing to promote anti-racist work on our campus.
Thank you. And Angie, what role does our African American Studies Department play? What kinds of courses and experiences can our students expect through the department?
Well, that has become, I think, the site of much of the work that students can expect in our educational mission. The courses that we offer in African American Studies range across the spectrum of human existence, right? There are courses that engage specific writers, specific topics, such as health inequities, social inequities, cultural phenomena, in terms of music. And that's wonderful and necessary. I also would like to ask, in the company of my colleagues, if there are other departments that should also be about that business too, about that work as well. Sure. Students really love the courses that we offer because they are so relevant to their lives, right? We see all of those young people in the streets. Those are our young people. And so they want to have these conversations. Rosemary mentioned that we went on, and I received a number of emails after where the students wanted to continue the conversations that we were having. So, it's in those courses that we get that opportunity because, as we know, education is one of our greatest democratizing tools.
Yeah, thank you. Now, these past few months have been particularly difficult as we've grappled with COVID-19 and at the same time faced the killings of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor by police Now Jacob Blake, who's paralyzed after being shot in the back 7 times. We are reminded just how far we have to go to address racial injustice in our nation. As you have looked at this summer, what would you want to share with our community about the work that we have ahead?
We have a lot of work ahead. Dr. DeJoya, you will remember several years ago when there was a committee established to look at our curriculum, and one of the recommendations that came out of that was the establishment of a diversity requirement. And in fact, that was done. It was done as an overlay, however. And so that was the first hurdle, getting that offered. What we're hearing from our students is we need to take it a step further. We need to make sure that we have a consistent set of criteria that must be robust so that students, it shouldn't matter whether they're taking a class in economics or whether it's sociology or what have you, but the courses should spend a substantial amount of time addressing issues, not only of diversity, but I would say, dare say, of race, especially given the moment and where we are now. So that is a significant amount of work that needs to happen. About 5 years ago, you made a commitment to establishing a racial justice institute or center on our campus. And we're moving towards that. And I believe that's one area where we can perhaps see some movement and working across the campus, connecting all of the various faculty who are doing research and scholarship in this field. So that's another body of work. Also, we have a number of our students who are going into the Washington, D.C. community, working with underserved communities, not only in basic reading and writing for students, but also working and establishing clinics within underserved communities so that individual families can have access to better healthcare. So those are just some of the things that come to my mind immediately about steps that we can actually take. And one last thing I would say, Christopher King, who's done some significant work on health disparities in his research, using his findings to turn that into social policy and making sure that we bridge the gap between the research that our scholars are doing and what our government is doing at the local level to inform steps that they can take to enhance the lives and lived experiences of members of our communities.
Thank you. Thank you. Angie.
Oh, those are all just excellent, excellent. I think if we were to work toward those, we would be doing a great, great service. In addition, I think in supporting faculty who are trying to make those connections between, our work in Georgetown and the community at large, and helping to develop those avenues, I think would be really, really important for our larger community. But for our students, it is my hope, because yes, the Racial Justice Initiative is still ongoing. And I hope that we will be very conscientious in including our undergraduate population in that, because they really are in need of the work that institute will provide. They really are the ones that need to be a part of those discussions for the future. And I hope as well that we continue to model, the very best of practices in terms of being at the front of these very difficult times. I've been very appreciative of the statements that the university has made when these things that have occurred most recently, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and now Jacob Blake, that's important. That modeling is very important. I can't help but think of Coach Thompson and how he took that stand against Prop 48. Father Massengale, mentioned that this is a relay race, which is a wonderful metaphor. And it really is, because what Coach Thompson didn't, fix all of the problems, right? But it was a step. And we all have to be willing to take that step and also be willing to understand it may not all happen with that one step.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, you both have had a deep commitment to mentorship over the years. Can you talk a little bit about the role that you see for mentorship?
Yes, mentorship is very, very significant. And I don't want to steal Dr. Mitchell's thunder, but I really attribute two of our eminent faculty, Dr. Sayika Colbert and Dr. Robert Patterson, who were undergraduate students mentored by Dr. Mitchell. And I will let Dr. Mitchell tell the rest of that story. To me, speaks volumes about the power of our faculty and what we can achieve if we take our undergraduate students under our wing and let them see higher education as a possible place, because we need more people who look like us to be part of the future academy. And we have to start now, and actually yesterday I would add. And we know it takes a long time to develop a faculty member, but we have to take these steps. I can also think of several undergraduates who work in my office who are now attorneys, alumni of Georgetown. So I think each of us can cite names, and I'm sure you can as well, Dr. Joya, can name people students who've taken your classes. And so I think that's a very, very important work and important service that we can do for our students.
Thank you. Angie, you're one of the great mentors in Georgetown's community. Would you talk a little bit about how mentorship, what it means to you?
I'm deeply appreciative of what you both said. I had great mentors. And I think, again, that notion of modeling was very important for me, because I never want to be the first. I want to open opportunities to all of my students so that they can be all that they can be, right, in terms of their aspirations, dreams, and possibilities. And so it's just been very gratifying for me to be able to occupy that space that others occupied for me. And it's been just incredibly important to do that work in terms of diversifying faculty. Because as we know, even still, we need that work more and more, and it's very important because representational politics, I think, is key in so many ways still, even in the 21st century, it still is. And just, helping students to see the possibility of where they can contribute.
Thank you.
Is delightful.
Thank you. As we know, we're in a virtual environment right now because of the requirements of public health. And as part of our layered public health framework, we've worked on a campaign to encourage everyone in our community to follow important public health protocols to help keep our community safe. We call it Every Hoya Everywhere. What does Every Hoya Everywhere mean to you? How do you see your role in helping to keep our community safe?
I want to be very, very literal about it. So for me, I think we have to exemplify the conduct that we would like our students to follow. Yeah. So we have to set the tenor, and we have to wear our masks. We have to socially distance. We have to take opportunities to educate our community. We have to make sure that our students are aware of that this is not for themselves, but for everyone. I think we have to rally around this disease and make sure that we are supporting each other, and we are providing the kind of quality of care so that all of our students and every member of our community would be held up and supported in a way for the good of all members of the Georgetown community, as well as for people's families with whom they'll be sharing some time and spending some time going forward.
To that notion of being an example, right? Modeling. In order to create the kind of community we want, we have to take care of our community. And I think that's what that phrase means for me. Again, going back to men and women for others, right? And following the science. I've been deeply appreciative that that's what we've been doing. The university's mission is truth. And if we're not following the science, what is the truth of this moment in terms of our health, I just don't know what we are doing if we are not doing that. So we have to take care of each other.
Thank you. Well, I can't thank you both enough for taking this time to be with us. In closing, is there one thought you'd like to leave with our community as we begin this fall semester?
One thought I would say, and this is more directed at students, although it certainly has application to our colleagues, and I think we have to look within ourselves, examine what our values are, what our thoughts are. I think we have to make sure that we know that we all have biases, but the trick is to make sure that we don't let those biases influence us in negative ways. We want to make sure that we treat everyone in the way that we would like to be treated. For the students, you set a tone in the classroom. Not only your professors, but you as students do as well. You want to make sure that you reach out to the student next to you. Reach out to those students who are different from you, and offer them a welcoming hand. And it can certainly be a really experience if you're only one of a kind. And so those to me would be the more significant things that we can do in terms of students. But as I mentioned, this also has implications for us as faculty members and as colleagues. So again, reaching out and being fair and being respectful and embracing each other and making sure that we create the kind of community where we all feel a sense of belonging and knowing that we are giving back to Georgetown.
Thank you, Rosemary.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Angie?
Yes. And I think in addition to what Rosemary said, which is crucial, that we have to also be encouraged that this moment, however trying it is, provides us many opportunities to make the kinds of changes in our world that we would like to see, and that we are responsible for each other, and that we must move beyond our comfort zones in many ways and move into spaces where we can have community with others.
Thank you. Thank you both. Angie and Rosemary, I want to thank you so much for our conversation. We're grateful for your insights, your leadership, and I look forward to being with all of you again tomorrow in our next interview. Take care of yourselves and take care of everyone around you. For every Hoya, everywhere.